Hello and thanks for joining me for some more landscape photography, although as you can tell from the title it's not more landscape photography, it's a retrospective. Pretty much a standard sort of video to be made at this time of year. And if I'm honest, 2022 hasn't exactly been a bumper year for me. I haven't got out anywhere near as much as I'd anticipated at the turn of the year. Also, I'd planned to do a lot of work on my Royal Photographic Society distinction project. I'll be bringing you up to date on that a little bit later on, but suffice it to say, haven't made as much progress as I would have liked. Anyway, I've pulled together 10 images from this year, which I quite like, and it turns out that almost all of them weren't made as part of a video, and I think there might be a lesson there in some respects, that I tend to make images that I prefer when I'm not trying to video them, or perhaps it's that I go out with a video camera and I don't get anything that's as good as it might be. Anyway, to be fair, in previous years that hasn't been the case, and hopefully next year it won't be either. But for the most part, these images were taken when I was out with friends, group meetups, trips away, that sort of thing. And I think perhaps the reason why I quite like them is because they remind me of those good times as much as they're a decent image. So anyway, let's crack on and have a quick look at these first 10 images. This first one was taken back in February. Of course, the church in the sea. I don't think a year goes by without me including one of those in my collection. I got a call from Mark McNeil, a photographer who, if you live in the UK, you'll probably have heard of. He's got a book out at the moment, Britain by Night, and it's well worth checking out. Mark messaged me to say that he's on my local beach, so I dropped everything, grabbed the camera and whizzed down to spend an hour with him. Very enjoyable it was too, and I got a half-decent image out of the very difficult conditions we were faced with. But very good to meet Mark and spend a bit of time with him. Now, this second image is from March, and it's from a group meetup that myself and Gary Norman came along as a guest tutor. I was simply demonstrating a composition. We knew the light was going to start piling through this valley at Rhyddfu, but in the end it's probably the only image that I've taken this year that has found its way onto my website, except as part of a video catalogue. This next one is late April, early May, when me and my friends from the Photography Pubcast went up to Glencoe for a few days. We climbed a hill, and I don't think any of us would ever be able to tell you what the hill is actually called, although it did get a nickname because Gary Norman said, "There's no way I'm getting up that bastard." So the hill became known as the Bastard, but the views from it were fabulous. This was from our last evening. We didn't really get any light, but I took this pano anyway. Out of all the images I got over those few days, I think this is my favourite. This one did appear on a video. This is when I camped in June on the summit of Aghan. That's the Aghan Nantla. That's the Nantla Ridge in this panoramic image. The reason I chose this one is because it reminds me of a fabulous night's camping. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I didn't get out very much with my tent this year, so I had to include this. This one I've included because even though it's a cheesy subject, I do quite like the composition that I managed to get on this. It's 4 shots taken over about 45 minutes, which I've blended, starting with the foreground and leading out to the sky, which was taken about 20 minutes after sunset. The reason I've included this is because it's the very last image that I took with my old EM1 Mark II before I replaced it. And it's exactly the same subject as the very first image I took with it a few years ago. So it kind of closed the circle for me. Plus, I was out with some friends for this one from my Facebook group, mostly Micro Four Thirds Landscapes. We had a cracking day out on the island. And then 5 days later, I was in Liverpool for my wedding anniversary and birthday with the lovely Mrs. G. We were in a hotel at the Albert Dock. And this is the first decent image that I captured with my new OM1. I'd played around with it before we headed off, but this was shot through the window of the hotel room because you couldn't open them, and it's a handheld 6-second exposure. So I was really trying to find out what this OM1 could do, and I wasn't disappointed. And then in August, I took the OM1 with me when I went on a business trip to London. I had a couple of hours to kill one morning, and I was walking around the South Bank, but I had the very basic 14-42 pancake lens with me. So I had the flagship camera paired up with the cheapest possible kit lens. It was to do with weight and I was trying it out, but I thought I'd have a go at a bit of street work, and I really quite like this one. So jump forward to November and an afternoon out on Wastwater with Stuart McGlennan. I've mentioned this day out before, quite recently actually, but I do quite like the image and fond memories of a cracking day out with Stuart. Another very recent one which you've probably seen. This is from the day I got caught in a blizzard, and by the time I got back down to the valley floor it had cleared up nicely. This final one's been shared on social media but not on any videos. It's from Christmas Eve when I was out first thing with Winnie the Pooch. The sun was up, shining over my left shoulder as I looked out to sea, and this amazing squall was blowing up with the sunlight illuminating the cloud front. As you can see on the horizon, it was absolutely pouring down, but the light on the cloud bounced onto the sea and catching the tops of the marram grass made for an image which I'm really happy with. I love this sort of image, but it always depends on the light. So that's it for my 10 images from this year. I am more hopeful for 2023. I certainly intend to get out more. And coming on to the RPS project, well, that ground to a halt round about summertime. I found quite a few subjects that were interesting, and I was hoping that when the summer vegetation had died away, I'd be able to make more of them. But return visits didn't really work out as I'd hoped. The problem is that my statement of intent, which I shared with you last year and said I won't be changing, more of that shortly, but it was all about the derelict buildings being reclaimed by vegetation. Now, I made a rod for my own back because even when the summer growth had died away, a lot of the subject material was really difficult to make it stand out in the image because kind of by definition it's covered in vegetation. And I couldn't get anything I was happy with, and so I've sort of wasted the last 3 or 4 months flogging a dead horse. So I've decided that I'm going to kind of revisit the terms of my statement of intent. Now, it's perfectly feasible to take a series of pictures and retrofit the statement of intent by writing some words that kind of encompass what the pictures are about. But that kind of undermines the whole point of setting yourself a project. But what I am going to do is slightly change the terms of reference and change it from images where vegetation are reclaiming the derelict buildings as to more just studies of dereliction. It still covers industrial and agricultural heritage because the images that I'm happy with that I've got so far cover both of those aspects of old buildings and bits and pieces left lying around by man after we don't need them anymore. So another aspect of the project that I was struggling with was that I ended up with a series of images that were all shapes and sizes, and I couldn't make a coherent gallery out of them. So I decided that I would square crop all the images. Now, the whole basis of this sort of project is that each image really has to be on its own merits a good image. You can't have any problematic ones in there. You're unlikely to gain a distinction if you put forward 19 good images, but there's a real dog in there as well making up the numbers. So I have to be really careful about how I make my selections. The other thing is that those 20 images, or 21, I think you've got a choice, I can't remember exactly. I'm going to put together 21, I think, and then reread the rules. Anyway, but the images as a body of work also have to be coherent. Now, you could argue, well, yeah, it's a bit lame just making them all a square crop. But that just, for me, contributes to the coherence of the project as a whole. and it also forces me to think more carefully about my compositions, which forces me to think more carefully about each image on its own merits. So that's my idea going forwards. I've got, I think, 15 images together so far, but those images won't all necessarily make the final cut. It kind of depends what I come up with over the next few months. But I think that after a real crisis of confidence, I thought to myself, well, what do you think you're doing going after an RPS distinction, getting a bit big for your boots? But I look back over the ones that I thought might be candidates, and I might get away with it. Anyway, I am going to go forward with it, so we'll see how it pans out. What I'm going to do is put them all together at the end of this video for you to have a look over. I'd welcome feedback in the comments. I haven't set them up as gallery images with the camera settings and all this, that and the other, because in the distinction process, all the judging panel gets to see is the images. So it's going to run to about 90 seconds. And yeah, you can have a look, see what you think. As I said, not all of them will necessarily make the final cut. It's just kind of what's in the file at the moment. So I think I'm going to leave it there for this one. It just remains for me to wish you all a very happy 2023, and also to thank everybody that supports the channel and leaves such generous feedback in the comments. There's a whole bunch of really nice people out there who are very, very encouraging, and I thank you all. And if all you do is tune in and watch the videos, I appreciate that as well. So, leave it there for this one. Thank you ever so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, why not subscribe? Join me next time. Cheers.